Chapter 1. The Foundation and the Fracture. The soft glow of my dual monitors was the only light in the study, casting long, dancing shadows across the walls of our apartment. Outside, the city hummed its nightly lullaby, a distant chorus of sirens and traffic that had long ago become white noise. Inside, there was only the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of my keyboard. Code scrolled up the screen in neat, orderly lines, a digital testament to logic and structure. It was my sanctuary. In the world of ones and zeros, everything had a place, a purpose. A problem had a solution. It was clean. It was reliable. The door creaked open, spilling a warm yellow light from the hallway into my meticulously ordered darkness. "Still at it, Vance?" Chloe's voice was like a splash of vibrant, chaotic color on a monochrome canvas. She leaned against the doorframe, a silhouette framed by the light, one hand on her hip. Even after a long day at the marketing firm, she fizzed with an energy that I, a software developer who spent 8 hours communing with servers, could never hope to match. "Just debugging a persistent little glitch," I murmured, my eyes still fixed on the screen. "Almost there." "You're always almost there," she teased, stepping into the room. She smelled of her expensive floral perfume and something else, the crisp, electric scent of the city night she so loved to conquer. "You're going to turn into a robot. Beep boop borp. I'm Liam. I love code more than my girlfriend." I managed a faint smile, finally swiveling in my chair to face her. "The code doesn't steal the covers or use up all the hot water." She playfully rolled her eyes and flopped onto the small sofa we'd squeezed into the room. "The code also doesn't take you to that new rooftop bar downtown or surprise you with concert tickets. Honestly, Liam, it's Friday night, the whole world is out having fun, and you're in here playing with your thingamajigs." That was the word she always used, thingamajigs. To her, my entire career, the complex architecture of systems I built and maintained, was a collection of incomprehensible toys. It was this same dismissive yet affectionate tone that sent a ripple through time, pulling me back 6 years to a place that felt like another lifetime. A place of cheap beer, loud music, and the terrifying, thrilling uncertainty of being 19 years old. The college party was a sweltering sea of bodies packed into a small off-campus house. The air was thick with the smell of spilled drinks and youthful desperation. I was a wallflower by nature, a solitary planet in a galaxy of screaming, laughing, colliding stars. I was nursing a single plastic cup of flat beer, my back literally against a wall, trying to calculate the optimal moment to make my escape without seeming rude to the friend who had dragged me there. And then I saw her. Chloe wasn't just at the party. She was the party. She was standing on a coffee table, a stolen traffic cone on her head like a crown, leading a slurred, off-key chorus of some pop song I didn't recognize. Her laughter was a cannon blast that cut through the droning bass of the speakers. She was pure, unadulterated chaos, a beautiful, dazzling supernova of a girl. I was intimidated, mesmerized, and utterly terrified of her. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. For anyone else, it would have been nothing, a random glance across a crowded room, but she held my gaze. A slow, mischievous grin spread across her face. Then, to my abject horror, she hopped down from the table and began to weave her way through the crowd, directly toward me. My fight-or-flight response went into overdrive. My brain screamed flight, but my feet were bolted to the floor. "You," she said, her voice somehow both a shout over the music and an intimate whisper. She pointed a finger at my chest. "You look like you're about to solve a very serious math problem." I stammered, my mind a blank slate. The problem of how to get out of here. Her laugh was even louder up close. "Wrong answer. The correct answer is, how do I get a dance with the queen of the party?" She didn't wait for a reply. She grabbed my hand, her skin warm and electric against my own, and dragged me into the writhing mass of people on the makeshift dance floor. I couldn't dance. I had all the grace and rhythm of a filing cabinet, but she didn't care. She moved with a fluid, joyful abandon, pulling me along in her wake. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the quiet, nerdy kid in the corner. I felt seen, drawn out. For those few minutes, her whirlwind of energy became my own. It was exhilarating. It was addictive. She was the fun-seeking wild child, and I, the stable, grounded boy, was her new favorite project. That night began the central dynamic of our relationship. It was a simple equation. She was chaos, and I was order. She would pull me out of my shell, force me to live a little, to break my rigid schedules, and I would be her anchor. I would be the one to pull her back when the tide of her own impulsiveness threatened to sweep her away, and it threatened to, more than once. The most potent memory, the one that cemented my role in her life, came in our final year. It was the night before her macroeconomics final, a course she absolutely had to pass to graduate. She had spent the semester treating her studies like an inconvenient afterthought, a boring distraction from the more pressing matters of themed parties and late-night adventures. She'd always been smart, blessed with a natural charisma that got her through most things, but she couldn't charm her way to a passing grade on this one. My phone rang at 2 in the morning. It was Chloe, her voice a choked, panicked sob. "Liam, I'm going to fail. I'm going to fail everything." I was at her apartment in 10 minutes. I found her exactly as I'd pictured, sitting on her floor, surrounded by a fortress of textbooks and scattered, useless notes. Her face was pale, streaked with tears and smudged mascara. She looked small and broken, the dazzling supernova reduced to a flicker. "I don't understand any of it," she whimpered, gesturing wildly at a chapter on fiscal policy. "It's just words. I've been reading the same page for an hour. I'm so stupid." "You're not stupid," I said, my voice calm and even. It was the only tone that ever worked when she was like this. "You're panicking. Big difference." I knelt, gathered the scattered papers into a neat pile, and sat beside her. For the next 5 hours, I became her tutor, her coach, her entire support system. I broke down complex theories into simple, digestible parts. I drew graphs on a whiteboard, created flashcards with key terms, and made her explain the concepts back to me in her own words. We drank a truly disgusting amount of instant coffee and stale energy drinks. At one point, around 4:30 a.m., she slumped against my shoulder, her exhaustion a physical weight. "Why are you doing this?" she mumbled into my shirt. "I'm a mess. I've been a horrible girlfriend, ignoring you to go out all the time." I looked at the top of her head, at the way the lamplight caught in her hair. "Because," I said softly, "I know the person underneath the mess, and she's worth it." I felt her sigh, a deep, shuddering breath of relief. It was in that moment I realized I wasn't just in love with her vibrant energy. I was in love with her vulnerability, with the part of her that needed me to be her rock. She passed the exam. She got a C-, but it was a pass. When she saw the grade posted online, she threw her arms around me with a force that nearly knocked me over. "You saved me," she cried, her voice thick with genuine, overwhelming gratitude. "You're my hero, Liam. I would not have graduated without you. I swear I'm going to be better. I'm going to appreciate you more." That promise echoed in the silence of my study now, 6 years later. The grateful, desperate girl from that night felt a million miles away from the woman lounging on my sofa, scrolling idly through her phone. "Who's that?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Chloe looked up from her screen, a bright, artificial smile plastered on her face. "Oh, just some work friends. The marketing team group chat is blowing up. Julian, my team lead, is telling the most hilarious story about a client pitch that went wrong." She laughed, a short, breathy sound. "You had to be there." Her eyes flickered back down to the phone in her hands. She typed something quickly, and I saw the corner of her mouth twitch into a small, private smile. It wasn't the big, explosive smile she gave to the world. It was a subtle, knowing little thing. A smile that wasn't for me. A cold, unfamiliar feeling prickled at the back of my neck. I told myself I was being ridiculous. She had a new job, a new work life. Of course, she had inside jokes I wasn't privy to. She had earned this success. I had helped her get the interview at Sterling Innovations, prepped her for it, celebrated with her when she got the offer. I should have been proud. But as I looked at her, so absorbed in the glowing screen, the memory of the girl I saved began to feel less like a comfort and more like a liability. I had been her anchor, the stable ground beneath her feet. I had pulled her back from the edge so many times. But what happens when the person you saved decides your stability is no longer a comfort, but a cage? What happens when she starts looking for a new, more exciting tide to get swept away in? The question hung in the air between us, a silent, persistent glitch in the code of our life together. and for the first time I had a terrifying feeling that it was a problem I wouldn't be able to solve. Chapter 2. The Widening Cracks. The weeks following that Friday night unfolded with a kind of deceptive placidity, like the calm surface of a deep, cold lake. On the surface, things were normal. We woke up together, we shared coffee, we talked about our days, but underneath, a current of unease was pulling me further from shore. Chloe's phone had become a third entity in our relationship, an appendage she guarded with a quiet, fierce jealousy. It lay face down on the dinner table, a silent black monolith. It went into the bathroom with her when she showered. The notification sounds, once an innocuous part of our home's soundscape, now made the muscles in my jaw tighten. Her stories about work became more frequent, and always, they orbited one central blazing sun, Julian Croft. It was Julian thinks my ad copy is brilliant, and Julian took the whole team out to that new fusion place on the waterfront to celebrate a successful quarter. Each story was delivered with a breathless, starstruck admiration that was once reserved for me. She described his tailored suits, his confident stride, the way he could command a boardroom with a single incisive comment. "He's just so ambitious, you know?" She said one evening while I was rinsing dishes. "He doesn't just want to climb the ladder, he wants to build a whole new ladder. He told me you have to be willing to take big risks, otherwise you just get left behind." She didn't look at me when she said it, but I felt the comment land like a well-aimed dart. My life was the antithesis of risk. I had a stable job, a 5-year plan, a savings account earmarked for a down payment on a house in a quiet, sensible suburb. These were the things I thought were the building blocks of a future, the very stability she had once clung to like a life raft. Now she spoke of them as if they were anchors, holding her back from a more exciting voyage. The unease was a familiar phantom. It had a precedent. It wasn't the first time I'd felt this cold dread coiling in my gut, the sickening suspicion that I was not the only one occupying her thoughts. The memory, long suppressed, surfaced with a startling clarity, dredged up from the depths of our college years. It was our junior year. Chloe had enrolled in a ridiculously trendy modern art and expression class, mostly, I suspected, because the professor was known for giving easy A's and holding class outside on sunny days. She started talking about a guy in her class named Marco the sculptor, Marco the poet, Marco who had a really tortured, beautiful soul. I, the pragmatic engineering student, found the description nauseating. One night I was studying in our shared apartment when her phone, which she'd left on the kitchen counter, buzzed. I glanced over. A text from Marco Art glowed on the screen. "Still thinking about what you said today. You see things differently. It's beautiful." It was ambiguous, but it felt wrong. It felt intimate. When she came out of her room, I asked her about it, trying to keep my voice casual. "Who's Marco?" Her reaction was instant and defensive. Her eyes narrowed. "He's just a guy from my class. Why? Are you looking at my phone?" "It lit up on the counter," I said, holding up my hands. "I just saw the name." "He's a friend, Liam." "My God, can I not have male friends? Are you going to be one of those controlling boyfriends?" Her words were sharp, designed to make me feel small, to make me feel like the one in the wrong. And it worked. I felt a hot flush of shame. I was being jealous. Insecure, I loved her, and love meant trust. I backed down, I apologized, I let it go. But a week later, at a party, I saw them together. They weren't kissing, they weren't holding hands, but they were in a corner, their heads close together, whispering. He brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering on her cheek for a moment too long. Chloe didn't pull away. She smiled, that same small, private smile I was now seeing her give to the screen of her phone. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The world went fuzzy at the edges. I didn't confront her at the party. I waited, stewing until we got home. The argument was monumental. I accused her of being inappropriate, of emotionally cheating. She countered with tears, accusing me of being possessive and suffocating. "Nothing happened," she'd wailed, her face a mask of wounded innocence. "He's a friend. You're so determined to see the worst in me because you're insecure. You think because you're quiet and I'm outgoing that I must be doing something wrong. It's not my fault if people are drawn to me." She never truly admitted any wrongdoing. She just cried and deflected until I was exhausted, until I was the one comforting her, apologizing for hurting her feelings. I chose to believe her because the alternative was too painful to consider. I buried the doubt, packed it down deep, and plastered over the cracks with love and willful ignorance. I told myself it was a one-time thing, a moment of poor judgment on her part, a test of our relationship that we had ultimately passed. Now, years later, that buried doubt was breaking through the surface like a tremor. The pattern was undeniable. Julian was just a new, more polished version of Marco, and I was still the stable, sensible boyfriend, the perfect fool. The small signs began to accumulate, forming a mosaic of betrayal. A new bracelet appeared on her wrist, a delicate, diamond-studded piece that was far beyond her budget or ours. "Oh, this," she said breezily when I asked, admiring it on her own arm. "I got a crazy deal on a flash sale site. You wouldn't believe it." I knew how crazy could be with her finances. An impulse buy this extravagant was something I would have noticed when I checked our joint account. I didn't believe it for a second. Then came the late nights. Team dinners turned into strategy sessions that ran past midnight. One Wednesday, she texted me at 11 p.m. "Project is a nightmare. Julian is keeping a few of us late to hammer it out. Don't wait up. Love you." A cold impulse seized me. Sterling Innovations was a corporate giant, but their marketing department wasn't running a 24/7 command center. I picked up my phone and called her office line, the direct number I had pinned to our fridge. It rang and rang, echoing in the cavernous, empty office I pictured in my mind, before finally clicking over to her generic voicemail. 10 minutes later, I called the main switchboard. A bored-sounding security guard answered. "Sterling Innovations, night security." "Hi," I said, my heart pounding. "I was just trying to reach the marketing department. Is anyone still up there?" A pause, a rustle of papers. "Nah, mate, place is a tomb. Lights have been out on that floor since 7. When Chloe finally came home close to 1 a.m., humming happily, I didn't confront her. I just asked, "Productive night?" You have no idea," she sighed, kicking off her heels. "We were just going in circles." But Julian finally cracked it. He's a genius. The lie was so bald, so effortless, it left me breathless. I just nodded, a silent scream trapped in my throat. The final decisive crack came on the day of our anniversary. It wasn't a major one, just 4 years since we'd officially gotten together, but we'd had a reservation for weeks at a quiet Italian restaurant we both loved. I left work early, tidied the apartment, and put a bottle of champagne on ice. I was about to get in the shower when my phone buzzed. It was a text from her. "Hey babe, so sorry. A massive crisis just came up with the Sterling account. Julian needs me for an emergency dinner meeting with the client. I can't get out of it. We'll have to postpone. I feel awful. Rain check tomorrow?" I stared at the message, the words blurring together. A crisis. An emergency. It was all so flimsy, so transparent. This was our anniversary. In the 4 years we'd been together, we had never ever broken a significant date. I thought of the champagne sweating in its bucket. I thought of the quiet pride I felt in our longevity, in our shared history. All of it felt like a joke. I typed back a single, numb word, "Okay." She didn't come home that night. A text at 2 a.m. claimed the client dinner had run incredibly late and she was just crashing on a girlfriend's couch nearby. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark living room, the silence of the apartment pressing in on me. The love I felt for her was at war with the cold, hard certainty of her betrayal. But I was a man of logic. I was a man who needed proof. Suspicion was a poison, but evidence was a blade. I needed the blade. And then I remembered the iPad. It was on the bookshelf, gathering dust. She'd bought it years ago during a digital artist phase that lasted about 2 weeks, and now it was just a relic. But I had set it up for her. I had linked it to her accounts, to her email, to her iMessage. Our digital lives were synced, an ecosystem I had built myself. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It felt heavy, like a stone tablet on which a terrible judgment was written. I pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life. And there it was. It was an avalanche. A digital torrent of filth and lies. I opened her messages and the screen was filled with a long, unbroken conversation with a contact named Julian C. with a lion emoji next to it. The pet names jumped out at me first. He called her my Sparkle. She called him my Tiger. The content was sickeningly explicit, a detailed chronicle of their affair. Julian, Can't stop thinking about yesterday in my office. You're intoxicating. We were so reckless. Anyone could have walked in, it was perfect. They mocked me openly, casually. What does the boyfriend think you're up to tonight? He thinks I'm at a strategy session. The robot is probably debugging something. He never suspects a thing. It's almost sad. The robot. That's what they called me. The stable, reliable, predictable robot. The rage I expected to feel didn't come. It was something colder, heavier. A feeling of profound, hollowing emptiness. I scrolled further, back weeks, then months. I saw the planning behind the lies, the coordination of their alibis. I saw a picture he sent her of the diamond bracelet. A little sparkle for my sparkle. Wear it and think of me. I saw her plans to cancel our anniversary dinner, discussed with him 3 days prior. It wasn't a last-minute crisis. It was a premeditated execution of our relationship. I switched to her email. It was even worse. There were hotel confirmations for business trips she'd taken alone. E-tickets for a weekend getaway to a vineyard upstate, booked for next month. And then, the final, devastating blow. I found a chain of emails between Julian and his travel agent forwarded to Chloe. He was planning a trip, a 10-day tour of the Amalfi Coast. The email read, "Just need to finalize dates for the honeymoon. Isabel is handling the wedding stuff, leaving the fun part to me." He wasn't just cheating on his fiancée. He was planning their honeymoon and his affair in the same breath, with the same casual, arrogant ease. And Chloe was his willing, enthusiastic co-conspirator. I set the iPad down on the coffee table. The soft glow of the screen illuminated my face. The man who had loved Chloe Reed, the boy who had saved her, the stable rock who had anchored her, was gone. He hadn't just left, he had been annihilated, erased by the casual cruelty of 1,000 secret messages. The love hadn't just died, it had been murdered. And I was standing at the crime scene, holding the weapon, the evidence clear and irrefutable. The grief was still there, a massive black hole in my chest. But around its edges, something new was beginning to crystallize. It was cold and sharp and perfectly, terrifyingly clear. It was logic, it was structure, it was the plan for a solution. Chapter 3. An unlikely alliance. The morning after was a study in gray. The sky outside was a flat, unforgiving slate, and the light that filtered through the blinds seemed tired and weak. I hadn't slept. I had spent the night in a state of suspended animation, sitting on the sofa, the iPad screen long since gone dark, its damning contents seared onto the inside of my eyelids. The rage I'd anticipated had receded, replaced by a chilling, crystalline focus. Grief was a luxury I couldn't afford. Emotion was a vulnerability. What I needed now was a strategy. My first move was calculated. I sent a single polite email from my professional account to the general contact address for Sterling Innovations. Subject, meeting request, urgent personal matter. To the attention of Miss Isabel Sterling, my name is Liam Vance. I have some sensitive information that directly concerns you and Mr. Julian Croft, which I believe is in your best interest to review in person and in private. I am available to meet at your earliest convenience. Regards, Liam Vance. It was formal, impersonal, and just vague enough to be alarming. I knew a woman in her position wouldn't ignore a message laced with that much carefully worded menace. The reply came in less than an hour, not from a secretary, but from her directly. Mr. Vance, my office, 2 p.m. today. Do not be late. Sterling Innovations was headquartered in a gleaming tower of glass and steel that scraped the gray sky, a monument to corporate power. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and hushed reverence. As I gave my name to the receptionist, I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were a character in a movie, playing a role I had been preparing for my entire life. Isabel Sterling's office was on the 48th floor, a corner suite with a panoramic view of the city sprawling below. It was a landscape of ambition and success, Julian's natural habitat. Isabel herself was poised behind a large mahogany desk, not a single paper out of place. She was exactly as Chloe had described her, elegant with an air of intelligent authority that was almost palpable. Her dark hair was pulled back into a severe but stylish knot, and her eyes, a cool shade of blue-gray, assessed me with unnerving perception. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice even and collected. She did not stand or offer a hand. "You have 10 minutes to explain the meaning of your cryptic email." I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I walked to her desk, took out the iPad, and placed it squarely in the center of the polished wood. I had bookmarked the most damning conversations. "I believe this will explain everything," I said, my own voice sounding distant to my ears. She looked from me to the device, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. With a sigh, she picked it up and began to read. I watched her face, searching for the crack in the composure. For the first minute, there was nothing. Her expression remained a mask of polite skepticism. Then I saw it. A slight, almost imperceptible tightening of her jaw. Her knuckles, where she gripped the edge of the iPad, turned white. She scrolled, her thumb moving faster and faster, swiping through months of deceit in a matter of seconds. When she finally looked up, her face was pale, but her eyes were hard. "This is a joke," she said, her voice a low, dangerous hum. "A prank." "I assure you it's not," I said calmly. "And how do I know that?" she shot back, pushing the iPad away from her as if it were contaminated. "Anyone can fake text messages. You could have fabricated this entire thing. Who are you? A disgruntled ex-employee? Someone Julian beat out for a promotion?" I felt a surge of frustration. I had expected shock, anger, tears. I had not expected this corporate-level damage control, this immediate assumption of a hostile takeover. "I'm Chloe Reed's boyfriend," I said, letting the words hang in the air. "She's a marketing associate on his team. This is her iPad, synced to her phone. I found it last night." Isabel's mask flickered. She knew the name. Of course she knew the name. The name of the woman whose fawning admiration she had probably heard about from Julian himself. "This is insane," she said, shaking her head, more to herself than to me. "It makes no sense. We're getting married in 3 months, Mr. Vance. The invitations have been sent. My father adores Julian. He sees him as a son, the future of this company." Her voice cracked on the word father, a tiny fissure in her armor. This can't be real. The denial was a wall, and I knew I had to push back, hard. "Miss Sterling," I said, my voice firmer now, leaning forward slightly. "Look at the dates, look at the details. The team dinner on the waterfront? That was the night he bought her a diamond bracelet. Ask him to see the credit card statement. The emergency client meeting last night? That was our anniversary. He was with her. They were celebrating destroying 2 relationships at once. This isn't a prank. This is his life. This is what he does when he's not with you." My words hit their mark. I saw the impact in her eyes, a wave of hurt so profound it seemed to steal the air from her lungs. The hardness dissolved, replaced by a raw, naked vulnerability. Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment she looked not like a powerful general manager, but like a woman who had just been told her entire world was a lie. She was holding on by a thread, and I realized pushing her further would just cause her to shatter. I immediately softened my tone. "I know this is impossible to hear," I said gently, pulling back. "I'm not here to attack you. I'm in the same position you are. I thought you had a right to know the truth, that's all." She stared out the window for a long moment at the gray city that seemed to mock her from beyond the glass. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Mr. Vance," she said, her voice quiet and strained. "I will look into it. You may go." I left her office feeling strangely empty. I had deployed the bomb, but the explosion had been contained, muffled by layers of denial and self-preservation. The apartment felt cavernous and hostile when I returned. It was tainted. Every surface seemed to hold a memory of a lie. I was pacing the living room, a caged animal in my own home, when the key turned in the lock. Chloe walked in, looking refreshed and cheerful. The sight of her sent a jolt of ice through my veins. "Hey, you," she chirped, dropping her purse on the floor. "Rough day? You look like you've been wrestling a bear." She came over and tried to kiss me. I turned my head, and her lips met my cheek. She recoiled slightly, a confused frown on her face. "What's wrong?" "Just tired," I lied. It was disturbingly easy. Later that evening, as I was pretending to read a book on the sofa, she launched her offensive. "You know," she began, her tone casual but edged with criticism, "I was talking to Julian today about his weekend plans. He's taking Isabel to look at this incredible art installation upstate. He's always doing things like that. Spontaneous, exciting." She paused, waiting for me to take the bait. I remained silent, turning a page. "It's just, sometimes I feel like we're in such a rut, you know," she pressed on. We just do the same things. Work, eat, watch TV. It feels so boring. Your stability used to feel safe. Now it just feels like we're standing still while the rest of the world is moving. The robot is probably debugging something. The words from her text echoed in my head. This wasn't a real conversation. It was a script she had written, a justification for her actions that she was testing out on me. She needed me to be the boring, stable one to make her affair feel like a necessary escape. Then she delivered the killing blow. She idly twisted the new bracelet on her wrist. Julian got Isabel this gorgeous vintage necklace for her birthday last month. He just has such amazing taste. He knows how to treat a woman, how to make her feel special. She sighed, a theatrical sound of longing, clearly meant for me to understand what I was failing to provide. She was talking about the money I didn't have, and the money Julian was so willing to spend on her. He wasn't just more exciting, he was richer. He could give her the sparkling, shiny life she craved. My blood ran cold. The conversation with Isabel had shaken me, but this was a fresh betrayal, a new twist of the knife. I had to end this. I needed Isabel to see the truth, not on a screen, but in the flesh. I excused myself, went into the study, and closed the door. I pulled out my phone. Me, Miss Sterling, Isabel. I know you don't believe me. I need you to see it for yourself. Are you free for a talk tonight? Her reply was almost instant. Isabel, where? I thought for a moment, my mind racing. I knew Chloe's patterns, I knew her favorite spots, and I knew which ones Julian had been taking her to, thanks to my extensive research. There was one place in particular, a sleek, expensive cocktail lounge called The Alchemist, that she'd mentioned gushing about last week. A quick check of a shared calendar I still had access to confirmed my suspicion. She had it blocked out tonight from 9 p.m. onwards. The entry just said, "Drinks. Me, The Alchemist, 9:15. There's a small table in the back, by the window overlooking the park. Meet me there. Isabel, I'll be there." I arrived at 9:10 and secured the table. It offered a perfect, discreet vantage point of the entrance. Isabel arrived precisely at 9:15. She wore a simple black dress, but she looked exhausted. The confident armor was gone, her face etched with worry. "What is this, Mr. Vance?" she asked, her voice low. "Why here?" "Just give it 5 minutes," I said quietly. "Please." We sat in a tense, heavy silence. I didn't know if my gamble would pay off. What if they'd changed their plans? What if this was all for nothing? The doubt gnawed at me. Isabel was fidgeting with her napkin, her eyes darting around the room, clearly uncomfortable. And then at 9:22, the doors opened. It was them. They were laughing, their heads close together. Chloe was looking up at Julian with an expression of pure, unadulterated adoration that I hadn't seen on her face in years. He had his hand on the small of her back, a gesture of casual, confident ownership. They walked past our table, so wrapped up in each other they didn't even notice us sitting in the shadows. They took a table near the bar, and Julian leaned in and whispered something in her ear that made her throw her head back and laugh, a loud, joyful sound that echoed through the lounge. I didn't have to look at Isabel. I could feel her reaction. I heard the sharp, tiny intake of her breath. I saw from the corner of my eye her hand fly up to cover her mouth. The composed, powerful general manager had finally and completely vanished. In her place was a woman watching her fiancé, the man her father adored, the man she was supposed to spend her life with, lovingly charm another woman on what was supposed to be a work night. The prank was real. The texts were real. The betrayal was real. And now, she was a believer. Chapter 4. The 2-month war. We sat in the car, a nondescript sedan I'd rented for the night, parked across the street from The Alchemist. The silence inside was a living thing, thick with the fallout of what we had just witnessed. Isabel stared out the passenger side window, her gaze fixed on the laughing, oblivious couple framed in the warm light of the lounge. The cool, analytical general manager had been stripped away, layer by layer, until all that remained was the raw, bleeding wound of betrayal. Her composure was a shattered mirror, and I could see my own pain reflected in its jagged pieces. "I'm sorry," I said, the words feeling clumsy and inadequate. "I'm sorry you had to see that." She shook her head, a slow, deliberate motion. She didn't look at me. "Don't be," she finally whispered, her voice rough with unshed tears. "I needed to see it. Believing a text message is one thing, Seeing, seeing the way he looked at her, that's undeniable. She finally turned to face me, and her eyes, which had been filled with hurt, now held a new frighteningly cold fire. The sadness was morphing into something harder, something sharper. You were right. So what's our next move? I asked, my own mind already churning with possibilities. I'll go in there with you right now. We can confront them together, burn it all to the ground tonight. The idea was appealing in its simplicity, a quick, violent end to the pain. Isabel held up a hand, a gesture that was once again imbued with her innate authority. No, she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. A confrontation? That's what they expect. It's messy, emotional. It gives them power. He would spin it, twist it. He would tell my father I was hysterical, that it was a misunderstanding, that you manipulated me. He would find a way to make himself the victim. She paused, taking a deep, steadying breath. I don't want to just end it. I want to ruin him. I want to dismantle the entire fraudulent life he has built for himself. I want to show my father, the board, everyone who ever looked at him and saw a golden boy, exactly who and what he is. A cheap, lying, common thief. The venom in her last words was startling, but it resonated with a perfect, terrible harmony inside me. She wasn't just talking about her pain, she was speaking mine. The wedding rehearsal, she said, a grim smile touching her lips for the first time that night. It's in 2 months. It's at my family's country club. All our friends, our families, my father's most important business associates, they will all be there to celebrate our future. She looked back towards the window, at the man who was supposed to be her future, laughing with my girlfriend. That's our stage. We have 2 months to gather the ammunition for a war. Not a breakup, a demolition. And just like that, an alliance was forged in the crucible of our shared betrayal. We were no longer just 2 victims. We were partners, co-conspirators. The next 2 months became a blur of clandestine meetings, whispered phone calls, and a singular, all-consuming focus: reconnaissance. Our revenge was a project, and we approached it with the methodical precision of a corporate merger. Our first order of business was surveillance. We became private investigators of our own lives. We staked out their dates, which became more frequent and brazen. With Isabel supposedly busy with wedding planning and me giving Chloe an unprecedented amount of freedom, they grew careless. A romantic dinner here, a weekend brunch there. We sat in rented cars, armed with a telephoto lens and a simmering shared rage, documenting every stolen kiss, every lingering touch. Chloe, for her part, seemed to revel in her newfound liberty. "It's so great that you're not so clingy anymore," she commented one evening, while applying a fresh coat of bright red lipstick. She was getting ready for a girls' night out. "It was starting to feel a little suffocating, you know? It's healthy for us to have our own lives." "You're right," I said, my voice a perfect mask of calm agreement. "I've been busy with some side projects anyway." The lie slid out smoothly. My side project was her. She seemed to buy it, but sometimes I would catch her looking at me with a flicker of suspicion. A small frown would crease her brow when I'd tell her I had plans of my own and wouldn't be home until late. The man who once opposed her nightly excursions was now mysteriously absent himself. The anchor had cut the rope, and while she enjoyed floating free, a small, selfish part of her seemed worried that I might be drifting towards a different shore. It was a fleeting concern, easily washed away by the next flattering text from Julian. Isabel, with her access and resources, was formidable. She procured small, high-definition cameras. The first one went into my apartment. Installing it was one of the strangest, most violating acts of my life. I placed it on the bookshelf in the living room, disguised as a new smart speaker, its unblinking eye aimed directly at the sofa. The sofa where Chloe and I had watched movies, where we'd had arguments and made up, where we'd built our life together. The first time I watched the footage, my stomach churned. Seeing Julian in my home, on my sofa, his arm draped possessively around Chloe, was a visceral violation. Seeing them kiss, his hands roaming over her body in the space I considered my sanctuary, felt like swallowing glass. But Isabel was right. Emotion was a liability. I cataloged the footage, labeling it by date and time, my heart beating a cold, steady rhythm. Our greatest intelligence coup, however, came from Isabel's own brilliant, audacious mind. He's been using my father's office, she told me during one of our late-night planning sessions in a deserted coffee shop. We were hunched over laptops, the glow of the screens illuminating our tired faces. Dad's been traveling for the last 2 weeks. The executive floor is empty after 6. Julian has a master key card. He thinks he's untouchable. You want to put a camera in your own father's office? I asked, stunned. I want to catch the wolf in the shepherd's clothes, she replied, her eyes glinting. The plan was terrifyingly risky, but I agreed. The night we executed it felt like something out of a spy thriller. Isabel used her own key card to get us into the Sterling Tower after hours. The building was silent, a sleeping giant. My heart hammered against my ribs as we rode the silent elevator to the top floor. Her father's office was opulent, a shrine to success, with dark wood paneling and a desk the size of a small car. The air smelled of leather and power. It felt like a sacrilege to be there. Working quickly, I installed a tiny camera, no bigger than a shirt button, into the side of a bookshelf speaker. It had a perfect panoramic view of the room, including the large leather sofa against the far wall. We were in and out in under 20 minutes. The very next night, we got the footage. Julian and Chloe, emboldened by their seeming impunity, used the CEO's office as their private playground. I watched the video on my laptop, the sound muted, my hands clenched into fists. I watched them pour drinks from Arthur Sterling's private bar. I watched them laugh and kiss on the very sofa where multi-million-dollar deals were signed. I watched them commit the ultimate act of disrespect in the inner sanctum of the man Julian was supposed to revere, the man he was deceiving so profoundly. I filmed it all. It was disgusting. It was perfect. But the affair was only half of the story. Isabel's suspicions about Julian's character ran deeper than just infidelity. A man who lies this easily in his personal life is lying in his professional life too, she had theorized. Men like Julian don't have compartments. The rot goes all the way through. She began a discreet audit of his expenses. As general manager, she had the authority, and what she found was staggering. Julian was embezzling, not in large, easily detectable sums, but through 1,000 tiny cuts. Lavish client dinners at restaurants that, when cross-referenced, matched the locations of his dates with Chloe. Extravagant gifts, the diamond bracelet, a designer handbag, flights for their secret weekend getaways, all charged to a corporate card under vague descriptions like consultant entertainment or market research. He was funding his affair with Sterling Innovations money. He was making her father pay to be betrayed. As the weeks passed and our mountain of evidence grew, videos, photos, damning financial records, something else began to grow alongside it. Our partnership, born from a shared trauma, was evolving into something deeper. We spent hours together, sharing grim laughter over their stupidity, finishing each other's sentences as we planned our next move. I learned about her passion for architecture, her complicated relationship with her powerful father, her secret desire to one day open a small firm of her own. She learned about my love for the elegant logic of code, my quiet satisfaction in building things that worked, my family back in Ohio. I found myself admiring her fierce intelligence, her unwavering resolve, her surprising vulnerability. The stability Chloe had come to despise, Isabel seemed to value. She called it integrity. She said my methodical nature wasn't boring, it was dependable. There were moments, a lingering glance across a dimly lit cafe table, an instance where our hands brushed as we reached for the same document, sending a jolt of unexpected electricity between us. A late night when, exhausted and emotionally raw, I admitted how foolish I felt for missing the signs for so long. She had simply reached out and placed her hand over mine, her touch a silent offering of comfort and understanding that felt more intimate than any kiss. We both felt it, this fragile, burgeoning thing between us, but we both knew, without ever saying it, that we couldn't act on it. Not yet. To do so would be to fall into the same trap as our betrayers, to let our actions be dictated by anger and impulse. We would be no better than them. We were fighting for the moral high ground, and we refused to cede it. If what we were starting to feel for each other was real, it deserved a clean slate. It deserved to begin in peace, not in the chaos of war. So we held back, channeling all our energy, all our emotion into the coming storm. The day of the rehearsal drew closer, a date circled in red on our shared calendar, a promise of Judgment Day. The final pieces are in place. The stage is set. Let the curtain rise on the final act. Chapter 5, Judgment Day at the Rehearsal. The evening of the rehearsal arrived wrapped in a perfect, picturesque sunset. The Sterling family's country club was an oasis of old money and manicured perfection. Rolling green lawns, ancient oak trees strung with delicate fairy lights, and a sprawling clubhouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a serene lake. It was the kind of idyllic setting reserved for fairy tales. Tonight, it would be the backdrop for a slaughter. I stood near the grand stone fireplace, a glass of champagne in my hand, feeling strangely like an undercover agent deep in enemy territory. I wore my best suit, a dark charcoal gray that Isabel had insisted I buy for the occasion. "You're not just a guest," she'd said. "You're the executioner. You need to look the part." My pockets felt heavy, not with a weapon, but with something far more potent. In my right pocket was a small, sleek remote control, synced to the club's main projector system. In my left was my phone, queued up and ready. The real ammunition was already in place, laid out for all to see. On each of the dozen round tables, next to the elegant floral centerpieces, sat small, exquisitely wrapped gift boxes tied with silver ribbon, party favors. Chloe found me moments later. She was a vision in a silk dress the color of blood, the infamous diamond bracelet sparkling on her wrist. She looked radiant, triumphant. She had played the game, and in her mind she had won. She had the exciting, wealthy lover on the side, and the stable, dependable boyfriend still waiting at home. "There you are," she trilled, linking her arm through mine. "I was looking all over for you. Isn't this place just breathtaking? Julian has such incredible taste." She squeezed my arm, a gesture of conspiratorial intimacy that made my skin crawl. "It's something," I said, my voice a carefully constructed neutral tone. Her eyes scanned the room, a flicker of unease crossing her perfect features. "That's weird," she murmured, her gaze fixed on a corner near the back terrace. "Is that my mom and dad? And my brother? What are they doing here?" I followed her gaze. Her family was clustered together, looking awkward and out of place amongst the tailored suits and designer dresses. "Oh," I said, feigning a mild surprise. "I invited them." Her head snapped toward me, her eyes wide with suspicion. "You what? Why would you do that without telling me?" "Liam, this is Julian and Isabel's night. It's weird." This was the critical moment, the linchpin of the entire deception. I summoned every ounce of acting ability I possessed. I gave her a soft, indulgent smile, the kind I used to give her when she was being irrational. I reached up and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "I wanted to surprise you," I said, my voice low and intimate. "I have a surprise for you for later, after the toasts." I subtly patted my right jacket pocket, making sure she saw the gesture, letting her imagine the distinct outline of a small velvet ring box. The transformation was instantaneous. The suspicion in her eyes melted away, replaced by a dazzling, greedy light. A slow, triumphant smile spread across her face. This was it, the ultimate validation. The stable, boring robot was finally going to propose, locking her down, securing her safety net while she continued her adventures. She thought she was about to have it all. The happiness radiating from her was so genuine, so profoundly misplaced, it was almost poetic. "Oh, Liam," she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. She squeezed my arm tighter, pressing herself against me. "You shouldn't have." "Just wait," I said. "It gets so much better." The toasts began. Julian's father, a portly man with a booming voice, spoke of his son's ambition and brilliance. Then Arthur Sterling took the microphone. He stood tall, the picture of a proud father, his voice resonating with warmth as he spoke of his daughter's happiness and the bright future of the man she had chosen. "Julian," he said, raising his glass, "you are more than a protégé. You are the son I never had. To see you and my Isabel together, it is the culmination of a father's greatest wish. To the happy couple." A chorus of "to the happy couple" echoed through the room. Isabel, standing beside Julian, smiled a serene, chilling smile. Julian, preening under the praise, wrapped his arm around her waist and kissed her cheek. He looked out at the crowd, his eyes scanning the room with the arrogance of a king surveying his court. His gaze met mine for a brief second. There was no recognition. I was just part of the scenery. The robot. As Arthur Sterling handed the microphone back to the club manager, I gave Isabel a nearly imperceptible nod. It was time. She stepped forward. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice clear and steady. "It means the world to us. Julian and I have put together a little slideshow of our journey together, a look back at some of our most cherished memories." She glanced at Julian, a tender look on her face. "But before that, my love, I have a little surprise for you." As she spoke, I pressed the button on the remote in my pocket. The large projector screen behind the head table, which had been displaying a tasteful monogram of their initials, flickered. The lights in the room dimmed. A murmur went through the crowd. Chloe squeezed my arm in anticipation, thinking of her surprise yet to come. The screen did not show a smiling photo of Julian and Isabel. Instead, a high-definition video filled the screen. It was a close-up. Julian and Chloe, sitting in a sleek, expensive car, the car Isabel had rented for our first stakeout. He was whispering something in her ear, and then he leaned in and kissed her, a deep, passionate kiss, filled with a desperate, illicit hunger. A collective gasp swept through the room. It was sharp and sudden, like the sound of 100 people sucking the air out of the hall at once. Chloe froze beside me. Her hand on my arm went rigid, her nails digging into my sleeve. "Liam, what is that?" she whispered, her voice a choked, horrified squeak. But that was just the appetizer. The video cut to a new scene. The two of them, laughing as they entered my apartment. The footage from the bookshelf camera. It showed them on my sofa, kissing again. Chloe's family was staring at the screen, her mother's hand flying to her mouth, her father's face turning a dangerous shade of purple. Then the main course. The screen filled with the opulent, unmistakable image of Arthur Sterling's office. And there, on the leather sofa, were Julian and Chloe, tangled together in a way that left nothing to the imagination. A woman in the front row screamed. Julian's mother let out a strangled sob. Arthur Sterling stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief, his eyes locked on the monstrous betrayal happening in his own sacred space, projected 10 feet high for the world to see. And now, Isabel's voice boomed through the speakers, amplified and cold as a glacier. "If you would all be so kind as to open the party favors on your tables." A confused rustle filled the room as people fumbled with the silver ribbons. They pulled out not chocolates or almonds, but thick stacks of paper, neatly stapled. They were copies of Julian's corporate expense reports. And next to them, highlighted in damning yellow, were the corresponding credit card statements, showing the charges for hotel rooms, jewelry stores, and romantic dinners that perfectly matched the timeline of the affair. The dam of civility broke. Chaos erupted. Julian's father, his face contorted with rage, turned on his son. "You worthless fool," he bellowed, his voice cracking. "You threw away everything for that?" He gestured wildly at the screen, where Chloe's face was frozen in a moment of passion. He spat the last word out like poison. "For that whore." That was the spark. Chloe's brother, a burly construction worker who had been silent until now, lunged forward. "Who the hell are you calling a whore?" he roared, shoving Julian's father. The two families collided in a mess of shouting and flailing limbs. Chloe's mother was openly weeping, while her father marched over to where we stood. He didn't look at me. He stared at his daughter, his face a thundercloud of disappointment. "After everything he did for you," he hissed, his voice trembling with fury. "Everything. He got you through college. He got you this job. And this is how you repay him? You are no daughter of mine. We're done." He turned and stalked away, pulling his wife with him. Through it all, Arthur Sterling had remained silent, his face a terrifying, pale canvas. He now moved, not with explosive anger, but with the deadly calm of a coiled viper. He walked straight up to Julian, who stood pale and shaking, unable to form words. He didn't yell. He spoke in a low, seething voice that was somehow more terrifying than any shout. "I took you into my home," he said, his voice shaking with restrained violence. "I took you into my company. I treated you like a son." He leaned in close. "Get out. Get out of my sight before I kill you with my bare hands. And know this, I will not just have you arrested. I will hunt you. I will use every dollar and every connection I have to ensure you never work in this city, in this country again. I will grind you into dust." He then turned to his daughter, his face softening, his eyes filling with a profound, aching sorrow. Isabel, he whispered, embracing her. My dear girl, I am so sorry. I was so blind. Amid the beautiful, glorious pandemonium, the shouting, the crying, the symphony of our revenge, I felt a hand slip into mine. It was Isabel. Our eyes met across the ruined party. The fire of vengeance in her gaze had been replaced by a quiet, exhausted relief. Without a word, we turned and walked away from the wreckage. We slipped out a side door, into the cool, quiet night air. The shouting and chaos from the clubhouse faded behind us, a distant, satisfying echo. We walked across the perfect lawn, under the fairy lights, leaving the ruins of their lives smoldering behind us. We didn't look back. We just kept walking, our hands clasped together, finally thinking not about the war that was over, but about the peace that was just beginning. The war is won. Now, the New World Order. Chapter 6. The Fallout and the Future. The week following the rehearsal was unnervingly quiet. It was the silence after a controlled demolition, when the dust is still settling and the new, altered landscape is coming into view. I had methodically packed all of Chloe's belongings into boxes, stacking them against the wall in the living room like a barricade. The apartment, once a shared space filled with her vibrant, chaotic energy, now felt like mine alone. It was clean. It was orderly. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt like peace. My phone rang late on a Wednesday night. The caller ID flashed a name I had already mentally deleted from my life, Chloe. I let it ring, listening to the electronic chime echo in the still apartment. It stopped, then immediately started again, and again. On the fifth try, I sighed and answered, putting the phone on speaker and setting it on the coffee table. I didn't say a word. Liam? Her voice was a wreck. It was thin, reedy, and choked with tears. The same panicked, desperate voice I hadn't heard since the night before her macroeconomics final. Liam, please, you have to talk to me, please. There's nothing to talk about, Chloe, I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. No, don't say that, she cried, a sob catching in her throat. I know I messed up. I know I made a mistake. A horrible, stupid mistake. What I did with Julian, it didn't mean anything. It was just an escape. It was stupid and thrilling, but it wasn't real. You and me, we're real. What we have is real. I almost laughed at the absurdity. What we have, Chloe, there is no we, not anymore. But we can fix it, she insisted, her desperation escalating. I'll do anything. I'll quit my job. I'll cut him out of my life forever. I was wrong. I see that now. I see everything so clearly. He was just a fantasy, a distraction. You're my rock, Liam. You've always been my rock. I need you. The familiar words, the ones that used to be a balm to my soul, now sounded like a manipulative script. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. She was running back to the safety of the harbor because her pirate ship had sunk. This wasn't your first mistake, was it? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. A confused silence on the other end. What do you mean? Junior year, I said, the words falling like ice chips into the silence. The modern art and expression class, your friend Marco, the poet. The silence that followed was heavier, more profound. It was the silence of a cornered animal. I heard her sharp intake of breath. Liam, that was a long time ago, she stammered, her voice losing its tearful edge, replaced now by the frantic whirring of a mind trying to formulate a new lie. We were kids. It was just, he was a friend. You were being so jealous back then. I didn't know how to handle it. Her excuses, the same ones that had worked so perfectly 6 years ago, were now just pathetic confirmation. She deflected. She blamed me. She admitted nothing. I saw you with him at that party, Chloe, I said, my voice like steel. I saw the way you looked at him. I chose to believe you then. I chose to bury it. But you and I both know you were lying. You've been lying for years. Julian wasn't the mistake. He was just the one you weren't smart enough to hide. A choked, strangled sound came through the phone. She had no defense left. I had taken away her last, most potent weapon, my own willful blindness. The key is under the mat, I said coldly. Your things are packed. Get them tomorrow. Leave my key on the counter when you're done. I hung up before she could reply, the click of the disconnect echoing with a beautiful finality. The next day, a desperate Julian Croft made his move on Isabel. He bypassed security and somehow managed to get to the executive floor, ambushing her as she got out of the elevator. She told me about it later that evening, her voice a mixture of disgust and grim satisfaction. He had apparently fallen to his knees, right there on the marble floor. He begged, he pleaded, he cried actual tears, professing his undying love for her, claiming Chloe was a meaningless diversion, a moment of insanity. When love didn't work, he pivoted to fear, begging her to talk to her father, to call off the lawsuit, to stop the financial execution. He said I was ruining his life, Isabel recounted, swirling the wine in her glass as we sat on my now liberated sofa. That he had made one mistake and I was destroying him for it. "What did you do?" I asked. "I helped him up," she said, taking a sip of wine. "And then I slapped him, hard. My handprint was on his cheek when security dragged him away." A small, fierce smile played on her lips. "I told him that if he ever came near me or my family again, I would personally ask my father to double the legal budget and to hire private investigators to audit every corner of his life back to his 16th birthday. I told him he had no idea what ruined looked like yet, but I would be happy to show him." With no one else to turn to, the two architects of their own destruction turned to each other. Chloe, disowned by her family and kicked out of our apartment, had nowhere to go. Julian, fired, disgraced, and facing financial and legal annihilation, was a pariah. They became roommates out of pure necessity, moving into a cramped, cheap apartment on the far side of town, the only place they could afford by pooling their dwindling resources. Their relationship, built on the thrill of stolen moments and illicit excitement, couldn't survive the harsh glare of reality. Isabel's sources told her the shouting matches were legendary, echoing through the thin walls of their new home. They were no longer a dashing team leader and his sparkling conquest. They were just two unemployed, miserable people with a mountain of debt and a shared bitter resentment, trapped together in a prison of their own making. In the quiet aftermath, Isabel and I began to explore what, exactly, we were to each other. The war was over, and the tentative feelings that had grown in the shadows of our espionage could finally be brought into the light. It was slow, careful. We were both gun-shy, both healing from the shrapnel of our previous relationships. But it was different. It was easy. With Isabel, there were no games, no scripts. She didn't see my stability as boring. She saw it as strength. She found my methodical nature comforting, not confining. She appreciated that I listened more than I talked, that I thought before I acted. She celebrated the very qualities in me that Chloe had used as justification for her betrayal. "You know," she said one night, as we walked through a park after a quiet dinner, "Julian was always about the grand gesture. The surprise trips, the extravagant gifts, it was all a performance. But he never once asked me about the zoning variance issue I was having with the city for the new warehouse. He never remembered that I hate cilantro." She smiled at me, a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes. "Last week you noticed I was stressed, so you made me dinner and then just sat with me in silence while I worked through a spreadsheet. You didn't try to fix it. You just were there. That meant more to me than 1,000 diamond bracelets." I found myself drawn to her sharp wit, her surprising warmth, and her deep-seated integrity. We were two halves of a whole we didn't even know we were looking for, forged in the most unlikely of fires. A few weeks later, she invited me to Sunday brunch at her father's house. It wasn't the Grand Country Club, but his private home in the city. Arthur Sterling greeted me at the door. The man whose world I had helped detonate now looked at me with an expression of profound, quiet gratitude. He shook my hand firmly. "Liam," he said, his voice gruff but sincere, "what you did for my daughter, what you both did, took courage. It took character." Isabel slipped her hand into mine, a simple public declaration. "Dad," she said, her voice clear and proud, "Liam and I are together." Arthur looked at our joined hands, then at me, then at the happy, relaxed expression on his daughter's face, an expression he told me later he hadn't seen in years. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. "Well," he said, clapping me on the shoulder and steering us towards the dining room, "it's about damn time she brought home a man with some integrity. Now come on, I hope you like steak. I'm opening the good stuff." As I sat at that table, surrounded by the warmth of a family that valued honesty and strength, with Isabel's hand resting on mine, I realized that Chloe had been right about one thing. Our life together had been standing still, but she was wrong about the reason. It wasn't my stability holding us back. It was her dishonesty. She had been the anchor, weighing us down in a sea of lies, and now finally I was free. I was moving forward into a future built not on a fragile foundation of excitement and deception, but on the solid bedrock of trust, respect, and a love that didn't need to be saved, only shared.
Epilogue, a letter never sent. Chloe's point of view. 1 year later. The paper felt thin, almost brittle, beneath my fingertips. It had been folded and unfolded so many times over the past few weeks that the creases were permanent, the elegant, thick cardstock softened and worn. I sat in the very last row of chairs, near an oak tree, far enough away that I was just a blur of color, a ghost at the feast. The sun was warm, the setting idyllic, an elegant garden ceremony, tasteful, understated, real. So unlike the flashy country club disaster of a year ago. God, was it only a year? It felt like a different lifetime. A lifetime when I still had something worth losing. My eyes traced the words on the page again, though I knew them by heart. It had arrived with the wedding invitation, a cream-colored envelope, the script an elegant, confident hand. Isabel's. I'd almost thrown it away, thinking it was a mistake, or a cruel joke. But curiosity, that old, damning vice, got the better of me. Inside, with the formal invitation to the wedding of Isabel Sterling and Liam Vance, was a handwritten note. Chloe. Please find enclosed an invitation to our wedding. I felt it was only appropriate that you be there. After all, in a strange way, none of this would have happened without you. We owe you a debt of gratitude. Thank you for showing me, with such unforgettable clarity, the true character of the man I was engaged to. You saved me from a lifetime of lies, and for that, I am sincerely grateful. A man incapable of honesty in one part of his life is incapable of it in all others, a lesson I nearly learned too late. Charm, as you know, is a currency that devalues rapidly when there is no substance behind it. More importantly, thank you for helping me see the true value of the man I am about to marry. You highlighted, perhaps unintentionally, all the qualities one should cherish in a partner: integrity, loyalty, dependability, quiet strength, the kind of deep, unwavering support that exists not for show, but simply because it is real. What some might carelessly dismiss as boring or stable is, in fact, the foundation upon which true happiness and trust are built. Liam is that foundation. It takes a certain maturity, I suppose, to appreciate rock over sand, substance over sparkle. Thank you, truly, for letting him go. Thank you for trading a life of genuine love and security for a bracelet and a fantasy that, inevitably, turned to dust. You freed him, and you freed me, to find the authentic partnership we both deserved. We hope you can attend and wish us well. If not, we understand, and wish you all the peace your choices allow. Sincerely. Isabel. Every single, polite, carefully chosen word was a razor blade. Substance over sparkle. Rock over sand. The peace your choices allow. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't cursed. She had simply laid out the facts of my catastrophic failure with the cool, detached precision of a general manager presenting a quarterly loss report. And the invitation? It wasn't a gesture of forgiveness. It was the final, elegant twist of the knife. A command performance: come and see exactly what you threw away. Come and watch the life that should have been yours. And like the idiot I was, I came. I couldn't stay away. I had to see it. I looked up from the letter. Liam stood at the altar, under an archway woven with white roses and greenery. He looked solid. Calm. Happy. He wasn't wearing the forced, tense expression he'd worn so often in our last months together. His smile was easy, genuine. His eyes were fixed on the path where Isabel would appear. He looked like a man who had finally come home. The robot. The name felt like ash in my mouth. I had called him that. Mocked him for his steadiness, his predictability, his quiet way of loving me, of saving me, over and over again. I'd mocked the very things that now, standing there in the sunlight, made him look like the only safe harbor in a stormy world. He was my anchor, and I, fool that I was, had complained that an anchor's job was to keep the ship from moving. I cut the rope. I sailed off in search of excitement, of thrills, of a tiger who promised me sparkle. The sparkle was long gone. The tiger was just a cornered, bitter man. Julian and I lasted 6 months in that cramped, miserable apartment. 6 months of screaming matches, of blaming each other, of the money running out. The charm that had seemed so dazzling in boardrooms and expensive restaurants curdled into petty narcissism when there was no audience, no expense account, no one left to impress. He blamed me for ruining his career. I blamed him for ruining my life. We were both right. He finally left one Tuesday morning, packing his few remaining nice clothes, leaving behind a pile of unpaid bills and the crushing weight of my own stupidity. I hadn't seen him since. I heard he was tending bar somewhere under a different name, 2 states away. The man who wanted to build a new ladder was now barely clinging to the bottom rung. The diamond bracelet? I'd pawned it 3 months ago to make rent. Substance over sparkle. Isabel's words echoed in my head. I sold the sparkle just to survive. Music started. A string quartet. Everyone stood, and I stood with them, my legs weak. And there she was. Isabel. She was beautiful, not in a flashy way, but in a way that radiated confidence and peace. She walked down the aisle on her father's arm. Arthur Sterling, the Titan, looked at his daughter, and then at Liam, with an expression of pure, unadulterated pride and approval. No blindness. Just clarity. Isabel saw Liam, and her face lit up. It wasn't the frantic, desperate, illicit excitement I had felt with Julian. It was something deeper. Slower. A quiet, certain joy. The look of 2 people who knew exactly who the other person was, flaws and all, and chose them anyway. They had walked through fire together, and come out the other side, forged. I watched Liam take her hand. I saw the way he looked at her. The way she looked at him. They understood each other. She saw the value in his stability, his integrity, his quiet strength. She cherished the boring man. She understood that the boring life I ran from wasn't a cage, it was a sanctuary. A life of true security, of genuine affection, of having someone who would sit with you at 2 a.m. and explain macroeconomics just because he loved the person underneath the mess. I had that. I had it all. And I traded it. For what? For a few expensive dinners paid for with stolen money. For the cheap thrill of sneaking around. For the fleeting, hollow attention of a man whose promises were as fake as the life he projected. I had chased a fantasy, and in doing so, became the architect of my own miserable reality. The minister was talking. Words like trust, honor, cherish, in hard times and in good. Words that had no meaning in the life I had chosen with Julian. Words that defined everything Liam was. I remembered the night of the rehearsal, patting his pocket, the greedy, idiotic thrill I felt thinking he was going to propose. He had given me a surprise that night. The surprise of the truth. Liam's voice, saying his vows, was clear and steady. The same calm, even tone that used to pull me back from the edge. It wasn't pulling me back now. It was sealing the door on the life I could have had. I couldn't watch anymore. The letter trembled in my hand. Thank you for letting him go. Tears, hot and bitter, finally spilled over, tracing paths down my cheeks. They weren't tears of sadness for him, not really. He was happy. He deserved this. They were tears of pure, unadulterated, soul-crushing regret for myself. For the girl who didn't know that the rock she was standing on was the only thing keeping her from drowning. As they leaned in to kiss, I turned. I carefully, silently, folded the invitation and the note, the map of my own destruction, and slipped it into my purse. No one noticed as I walked away, back towards the road, back towards the empty apartment, back towards the life I had so carelessly, so stupidly, chosen for myself. The music swelled, celebrating a beginning. For me, it was just the sound of a final, inescapable ending.